Well, hello, everybody. My name is Matt Davies. I'm not going to spend too long on me, but I'm a kind of a solo brand and strategy culture consultant. And one of the things that I tend to do a lot of is help align leadership teams. And I get wheeled in to kind of give the shot of energy required to get everybody focused around a very clear kind of objective and to kind of make sure they come up with something useful. Today, in the 10 minutes that I've been allocated very stingily by our esteemed host, Carly Murray, I want to kind of share three key things with you. First of all, we were going to ask a very quick question: why have a story at all? The second thing is, what does that look like? What does this story thing look like if you've not grappled with it before? I'm sure we all have, but it's worth touching on. And the third, perhaps the most valuable, is how can I give you some tools, some ideas, some thinking that you can deploy pretty much immediately. But first of all, when we go into why have a story, I think one of the key things to think about is that, and Sarah mentioned it earlier, we are all probably working very much on our kind of back to work strategy if we haven't already got that in place. It's the nuts and bolts are coming together. But one thing that I've found, at least with my clients, is that the articulation of that in an engaging, meaningful way is something that needs attention. And so that's why, really, we should have a story, in regards to the COVID situation we're in, but also broader. Why have stories anyway? Well, because stories, really, they help us deal with change. And change is everywhere, right? Sometimes we feel a little bit like Woody, right? Like, whoa, it's all happening. And, it makes us uncomfortable. And, when you think of our colleagues, from the top to the bottom, change is kind of unsettling. So people are feeling very unsettled. If we can, as leaders, or get our teams to feel safe and to understand that change in a meaningful way, then we're onto a good thing. So the best way to help people deal with change is to have a clear story that we communicate with confidence, so that people don't feel uncomfortable, they feel inspired, and I'm particularly thinking about as people start getting back to work in the new normal, how can we instill that confidence in them so that they get back to work with vigor rather than kind of feeling fearful or worried or concerned. So that's why stories, really, because stories help us to create meaning. They help us to deal with change. This is what the psychologists tell us. And I've got a ton of science behind this, which I won't bore you with now, but if anyone's interested, I can definitely talk to you about how we make sense of the world around us through the stories we tell ourselves as individuals, and also through the way that we see ourselves in our kind of life story. So why tell a story? Because stories help people understand why something is important and why they should care, far more than facts, data, spreadsheets, and all the stuff that as businesses we love to communicate typically. So what does kind of a shape of a story look like? What would that actually kind of mean? I'm sort of talking to you about this, obviously, as HR leaders, most of you, but I appreciate you then need to kind of, if you went down this road, you'd need to engage with your wider leadership team. And so here's some thoughts about how you might start to do that. Because they might say, well, we've got a story, right? We know what we're saying, but I think that it's quite important that this is taken really seriously. I'm going to refer back to Aristotle, right? As all good talk should, right? Because he kind of was the first one in history that defined a story in poetics. It's called the dramatic structure. I'm sure we're all aware from school: the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's what a great story has. It kind of makes it complete. And it's how we see the world. It's how we understand things around us. And of course, those who are into storytelling will no doubt have come across Joseph Campbell, who took Aristotle's idea and articulated it in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And why he's really interesting is because he basically said, look, every story kind of has this mono-myth, he called it, this typical plot line, which sees the hero go from their ordinary world, come out of that ordinary world, go through a huge challenge, a huge change, and then go back into their ordinary world, and have learned as they went through, and built themselves and grown as an individual. And that framework is really important, I think, to understand, because when we think about stories, really, we're not really the hero of the story. The audience is the hero of the story. We're trying as leaders to get them to go through this change and to help them through as like the mentor, but they're the hero. And so we need to put ourselves in their shoes. And I always think this is a great framework to work through with leadership teams. The other sort of thing I'm going to throw at you, this is Nancy Duarte. I think I've said her name right. She did a fantastic TED Talk, and I can share this afterwards, but she did this kind of shape of a great presentation. So she took talks like from Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, Steve Jobs, and she basically mapped them all out and there's loads of research behind this. Definitely check it out when you get a chance. But in essence, she said, look, this is how you tell a story. This is how you compel people to deal with change. You don't just kind of go beginning, middle, end. You kind of jump back and forth. Now, in your packs, oh, that doesn't work really well, but there you go, kind of goes invisible. In your packs, you may have found that there is a presentation/script canvas. And you'll notice that this script canvas is based very much on Nancy's work. Let me just show you. So in essence, basically, this is the shape of a great story. This is the shape of a compelling presentation that inspires people based on the work that I've mentioned. And it's kind of the same thing that Aristotle was talking about. There's the first act before the change. We need to get our leaders to be able to describe where we are now. And then they jump to what could be after the change. And as they go back and forth, it's kind of like they're answering tensions, if difficulties, challenges in the story. And so we get people to imagine getting to act 3 after the change and the great work that we've done, that new bliss, as Nancy Duarte calls it, towards the end. This is a great framework that I've developed, and me and Carly have worked together. I think Sarah, I think we worked with some of the Nestle professional people on this. And I found it very, very helpful with other clients as well, in terms of helping leaders get together and collectively running some workshops, running some swarming sessions around what this is going to be. But of course, we need to make this personal to each and every leader. We need to make it so that they can articulate it, remember it, and be able to kind of really talk about it, whether they're doing a one-to-one with somebody, whether they're talking to the managers who are then going to cascade that down, or whether they're talking a town hall or something in front of the whole business. And this structure is really simple and easy for people to appreciate. So I'm going to tell you finally a couple of quick tools, and run through these super fast, that you can use to get your leadership team together, to get them thinking in this way so that they all come together to tell an inspiring story. So here's some tools. One which I think is very, very helpful. First off, is to get them to work on what I call a change statement, like something really, really simple and really, really clear. So there's a framework on the screen that is a great kind of way of giving them a template. So you say like, what are we going to change? Because there's a desired benefit. We're going back after COVID. There's going to be some changes. These changes amount to this, and we're doing this because of this reason. That's the basics. So that's where we're going to change. So if you look at your kind of your framework, your canvas, you can put your change statement under what could be. You could also fill out the status quo in the bottom, what is now, and therefore you by default you're saying, what are we going to change? But all the leaders need to know that. The next thing I want you to think about is kind of resistances. So you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the audience. What are they going to be feeling when that leader or that leadership team stands up in the town hall? They're going to have certain resistances, certain uncomfortable things that they're grappling with. And one of the things I find very, very powerful is with this framework is that you can do some work on an individual basis with each leader, and you can get them to dig deep into their past, into their experience, to figure out when they also felt a similar thing, when they also had some resistance in a particular area, and help them to pull on that experience on an individual, I call them kind of like mini stories or authentic scenes that they can think about, so that they can have that vivid memory and be able to talk about that very freely without a script, without a PowerPoint deck. As I say, if it's a one-to-one with someone, they can really talk about that. Very powerful tool, that one. And so when you kind of bring that all together in our story canvas, what that leads to is something that you can sort of define with your whole leadership team with some areas of personalization. It gives them a structure. It gives them a way of articulating the beginning, where we are today, the middle, the turbulence and the challenges that we're going to face, and why it's going to be great when we overcome them. And then finally, the call to action and the new bliss, why we're changing this and why the world is going to be a better place for all of the things that we're trying to do. So why stories, ladies and gentlemen? Well, because they're going to help us create meaning and they're going to help your people deal with change. I've been Matt Davies. Thank you so much. I like to end with a Steve Jobs quote because I'm an ex-designer. The most powerful person in the room is indeed the storyteller. So let's go tell better stories, help our people feel safe. Let's inspire them rather than make them feel uncomfortable in these times. And let's get everybody bouncing back. Thank you very much.